In the frozen ruins of Sevastopol, 1942, a ghost moved through the rubble. German soldiers called her Der weibliche Tod, the female death. Soviet commanders knew her as Lyudmila Pavlichenko. And somewhere in those shattered streets, hidden among the corpses and concrete, a German master sniper had been hunting her for 36 days. This wasn't about territory anymore. This was personal. He had killed 3 of her fellow snipers, left their bodies as messages, left their rifles as trophies. And now he was making a fatal mistake. He thought being a woman made her weak. She hadn't slept in 2 days. Her hands were steady, her breathing controlled. Through her scope, she watched a shadow move behind a broken wall 300 meters away. Just a flicker. Most soldiers would have missed it, but Lyudmila Pavlichenko wasn't most soldiers. She was 25 years old, a former university student who once studied history. Now, she was making it 309 confirmed kills. More than any female sniper in recorded history. More than most male snipers would achieve in a lifetime. But before she became Lady Death, before she became a Soviet hero, before she toured America and challenged Eleanor Roosevelt on women's rights, she was just a girl who refused to be told what she couldn't do. This is the story of how a history student became history's deadliest woman. How love turned to vengeance. How 309 pulls of a trigger changed the Eastern Front, and how one woman's rifle spoke louder than any diplomat's words. This is the true story of Lyudmila Pavlichenko, the woman the Nazis feared more than an entire battalion. July 12, 1916. Bila Tserkva, Ukraine. Lyudmila Mikhailovna Pavlichenko was born into a world already at war. The Russian Empire was bleeding on multiple fronts. Revolution was brewing, and the girl who would become Lady Death entered a world that would never stop demanding she prove herself. Her family moved to Kiev when she was 14. While other girls were expected to focus on domestic skills, Lyudmila had different plans. She was sharp, competitive, fiercely independent. And when a boy in her neighborhood boasted about his shooting skills at a local club, something inside her snapped. She didn't just want to be as good as him. She wanted to be better. She joined a shooting club, practiced obsessively. By the time she was 20, she could outshoot almost anyone in Kiev. But shooting targets and shooting humans, those were different universes. She enrolled at Kiev University in 1937, studying history. She wanted to be a scholar, a teacher. She married young, had a son. Her life was following the expected path for a Soviet woman. Family, education, contribution to society. But history had other plans. June 22, 1941, Operation Barbarossa. 3 million German soldiers crashed across the Soviet border like a tidal wave of steel and fire. Hitler's invasion was designed to crush the Soviet Union in months. Villages burned. Cities fell, millions died, and Lyudmila Pavlichenko made a decision. She marched to the recruiting office the very first day. 24 years old, a history student with a toddler at home. She told them she wanted to fight. The recruiter looked at her like she'd lost her mind. "We need nurses," he said. She pulled out her marksmanship certificates. Competitions won. Scores that would make professional soldiers envious. "I'm a sniper," she said. Not a nurse. They didn't believe her. Women weren't frontline combatants. Women carried bandages, not rifles. But she was insistent, relentless. Finally, they gave her a test, more to humiliate her than anything else. They handed her a rifle and pointed to a distant target. She fired 2 shots, both perfect center mass. They stopped laughing. Within weeks, she was assigned to the Red Army's 25th Rifle Division as a sniper. They gave her a Mosin Nagant rifle with a PE scope, 7 pounds of wood and steel that would become an extension of her body. She was sent to Odessa, the southern front, where the Romanian and German forces were pushing toward the Black Sea. She had never killed anyone. That was about to change. August 1941, the outskirts of Odessa. Lyudmila lay in a hastily dug position, dirt caking her uniform. rifle pressed against her shoulder. Through her scope, she watched German infantry advancing across an open field. Her spotter, a grizzled veteran, whispered coordinates. Her finger rested on the trigger. This was the moment. The line you couldn't uncross. Shooting paper targets in a Kiev club was one thing. Ending a human life, watching through magnified glass as a man's future ceased to exist because of your decision, that was something else entirely. The German soldier in her crosshairs was young, maybe younger than her. He carried his rifle casually. He was laughing at something another soldier said. She took a breath, held it. He dropped. She expected to feel something. Horror, guilt, hesitation. Instead, she felt clarity. This was war. These men were invading her homeland, killing her people, burning her cities, and she had just proven she could stop them, one shot at a time. By the end of that first day, she had 2 confirmed kills. Within 2 months in Odessa, she would have 187. The girl who studied history was now writing it in blood. Odessa fell in October 1941. The Red Army evacuated across the Black Sea to Sevastopol, a fortress city that would become one of World War II's most brutal sieges. Lyudmila Pavlichenko arrived in Sevastopol with a reputation. Soldiers whispered about the woman sniper who moved like smoke, who could wait motionless for hours, who never missed, but Sevastopol would test her in ways Odessa never had. The siege lasted 250 days. The Germans threw everything at the city. Artillery barrages that turned streets into moonscapes, Stuka dive bombers that screamed death from above, infantry assaults that crashed against Soviet defenses in waves. And in this hell, Lyudmila hunted. She developed a system. Patience was her weapon as much as her rifle. She'd studied German positions for days, learned their patterns, their routines, which soldiers smoked at which times, which officers inspected trenches when, where sentries grew complacent. Then she'd strike. One shot, one kill. Then silence and stillness while chaos erupted around her target. She'd wait hours, sometimes an entire day, before moving. Let the Germans search. Let them panic. Let them fear the invisible enemy they couldn't find. But she wasn't invincible. His name was Alexei Kitsenko, also a sniper. They fought together, watched each other's backs, and somewhere between the death and destruction, something deeper formed. In war, love is both a strength and a fatal vulnerability. They made plans, whispered about surviving, about what they'd do when the war ended, about a future that seemed impossibly distant, but maybe, just maybe, reachable. And then, one morning, he didn't come back from his position. She found him hours later. A German sniper had gotten him. A single shot. Clean. Professional. Something changed in Lyudmila Pavlichenko that day. The calculated hunter became an avenging angel. For 36 days, she hunted the sniper she believed killed Alexei. German intelligence had identified a master sniper operating in her sector, an expert who'd killed over a dozen Soviet snipers. They were using him to hunt the hunters. She made herself bait. She'd expose herself, just slightly. A shadow passing a window, a reflection on metal, enough to draw his attention, enough to make him think he had an opportunity. Days passed, then weeks. Neither would take a bad shot. Both were too skilled, too patient. This wasn't war anymore. This was a chess match played with bullets across ruined city blocks. Finally, on day 36, she saw it. A glint, barely visible, behind a broken section of wall nearly 400 meters away. Most snipers wouldn't have noticed, but she'd been studying that position for 3 days. That glint hadn't been there before. She adjusted her position, millimeter by millimeter. Took her time. Let him think she hadn't seen him. Let him believe he had the advantage. Through her scope, she watched, waited. And there, the smallest movement, a shadow shifting, the distinctive shape of a rifle scope catching light. She exhaled slowly, let her heartbeat settle. The glint disappeared. She waited 3 more hours before her spotter confirmed the kill. The German master sniper was dead. His rifle, a Karabiner 98K with custom modifications, was recovered as a trophy. Lyudmila never confirmed it was the man who killed Alexei, but she hoped by June 1942 she had 309 confirmed kills. 36 of them were enemy snipers. She'd survived the Sevastopol siege longer than almost anyone, but her luck was running out. A mortar shell exploded near her position. Shrapnel tore into her face and body. She was evacuated by submarine, one of the last boats out before Sevastopol fell. Her war on the Eastern Front was over, but her war against fascism was just beginning. Lady Death didn't die in Sevastopol. She was too valuable. The Soviet Union realized they had something extraordinary. A young woman who'd killed more enemy soldiers than entire companies. A symbol of Soviet strength. A propaganda weapon that could inspire millions and embarrass the Germans. She was promoted to lieutenant, given the Soviet Union's highest honor, Hero of the Soviet Union. And then they sent her to America. September 1942. Washington, D.C., Lyudmila Pavlichenko stepped off a plane into a different kind of war. One fought with words, images, and public opinion. The Soviet Union needed American support. They needed weapons, supplies, pressure on Germany to open a second front. And they'd sent a 25-year-old female sniper to help convince them. The American press didn't know what to do with her. They asked about her uniform, her lipstick, whether she wore makeup in combat. One reporter asked if her skirt was regulation length. Another wanted to know if Soviet women were allowed to powder their noses. She was a combat veteran with 309 confirmed kills. She'd survived 2 major sieges, watched friends die, killed enemy soldiers at ranges most Americans couldn't imagine. And they wanted to talk about her fashion choices. At a press conference in Chicago, she'd had enough. "I am 25 years old," she said, her voice cold and steady. "I have killed 309 fascist invaders by now. Don't you think, gentlemen, that you have been hiding behind my back for too long?" The room went silent. She continued, "Gentlemen, I am 25 years old, and I have killed 309 fascist occupants by now. Don't you think, gentlemen, that you have been hiding behind my back for too long?" The speech went viral. Before that was even a concept, newspapers printed it. Radio broadcasts repeated it. She became a sensation not just for her kill count, but for refusing to play the role America wanted her to play. She toured the country, spoke at factories, rallied support for the Soviet war effort, and she formed an unlikely friendship with First Lady Eleanor Roosevelt. Eleanor Roosevelt invited her to stay at the White House. 2 powerful women from radically different worlds, bonding over shared beliefs in equality and human dignity. They corresponded for years after the war. Lyudmila challenged American perceptions. She spoke at Madison Square Garden to crowds of thousands. She raised money for the war effort. She shamed America for its slow response to opening a second front in Europe. And she did it all as a woman in her mid-20s who'd seen more combat than most. Generals. But the war wasn't finished with her. Yet, she returned to the Soviet Union in the WWII 1943. Not to fight. Her combat days were over, but to train the next generation of snipers. Everything she'd learned, every technique, every hard lesson paid for in blood, she passed it on. Hundreds of Soviet snipers would learn from Lady Death. Thousands of German soldiers would pay the price. After the war, she completed her education, became a historian, the career she'd set aside when the Nazis invaded. She lived quietly in Kiev, rarely spoke about her wartime experiences. The Soviet Union loved parading her as a propaganda symbol, but she just wanted to be Lyudmila again. She struggled with what we now call PTSD. The memories, the faces in her scope, the friends who never came home. She drank to quiet the ghosts. Lyudmila Pavlichenko died on October 10, 1974. She was 58 years old, a stroke, likely accelerated by years of injuries and stress. She was buried in Moscow's WWII cemetery, a final resting place reserved for Soviet heroes. Her legacy, however, refused to stay buried. 309 confirmed kills. It's a number that defines Lyudmila Pavlichenko in history books. A statistic that turns her into a weapon, a tool, a curiosity. But numbers don't capture the truth of who she was. She was a woman who refused to accept limitations society placed on her. When they said women couldn't fight, she fought. When they said women couldn't kill, she became the deadliest of them all. When they tried to reduce her to a pretty face in a uniform, she reminded them she'd killed more enemies than most men would ever face. But she never wanted to be a killer. She wanted to be a historian, a teacher, a mother to her son, a woman living a quiet life in a world at peace. War chose her. Fascism invaded her homeland, and she responded with precision, courage, and an unbreakable will. Her story matters not because killing is admirable. It's not. War is hell, and she knew it better than most. Her story matters because she represents something profound. The capacity of ordinary people to do extraordinary things when everything they love is threatened. She could have been a nurse. She could have evacuated. She could have hidden. Instead, she picked up a rifle and said, "No further." Today, her rifle is displayed in museums. Her story inspires films, books, songs. In Ukraine, in Russia, across the former Soviet Union, she's remembered as a hero. In feminist circles worldwide, she's celebrated as proof that courage has no gender. The Germans feared her. The Americans underestimated her. History, however, will never forget her. Every person in that scope was someone's son, someone's brother, someone's father. She knew that, carried it, and still did what needed to be done, because the alternative, Nazi occupation, genocide, the death of her homeland, was unthinkable. She was 24 when she started, 26 when she finished, and those 2 years forged a legend that will outlive empires. Lyudmila Mikhailovna Pavlichenko, history student, mother, diplomat, hero, and the deadliest woman the world has ever seen. Lady Death proved that sometimes justice speaks through the barrel of a rifle, and silence can be the most powerful weapon of all.